Welcome to Inside Islam Today. We're going to journey inside the Atlanta Masjid of Al-Islam in East Atlanta, where we will speak with Imam Sulaimaan Hamid. He is a young imam that has just recently been elected as the resident imam of the Atlanta Masjid. Stay with us as we talk to Imam Sulaimaan Hamid on Inside Islam Today.
So I'm born to Muslim parents. My father and my mother were both Orthodox or Sunni Muslims when I was born. And I hesitate to use that language only because we know that's new language to the Muslim American community. But both my parents were converts to Islam. Both were members of the Nation of Islam under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I'm originally from California. Went to Claire Muhammad School, the Claire Muhammad School system, the school system that's associated with the community of Imam Warithuddin Muhammad there in California. My mother was the principal, my father was the secretary, and some people add minister to his history, but we know definitely he was the secretary there of the mosque. So most of my childhood was spent in private school and Muslim schools. I also had the pleasure of how I really got connected to the Atlanta community is coming here and attending the W.D. Muhammad High School here in Atlanta for some time. I'm the last child of 7 children, so you know I had brothers and sisters who treated me like the little brother gets treated, so we had good family life. And that's a little bit about my upbringing. So after my high schooling, as I said, being a member of the community of Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, may Allah have mercy on him, he was awarded scholarships for students, Muslim Americans, to go study at one of the prestigious universities in Damascus, Syria. And so after high school, after working a little bit, my parents had always pushed me towards religious education. In fact, my 10th grade, my mother was trying to enroll me or pushing to enroll me in a Quran memorization school, but I protested. And she accepted my protest, and I regret it now, but that had always been some of what my parents intended for me. But this opportunity came about, Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, after high school and after working, for students to travel to Damascus, Syria, to the college there, Abu Nur University. The particular school is headed by the Grand Mufti of Syria of the time, and that leader, similar to Imam Muhammad, did a lot of interfaith work and outreach and things like that. So it was a 3-year program. Over a period of 5 years, we had been sending students from all over. Atlanta actually has the most students, males and females, and so it was a program that gave an excellent foundation in Islamic law, Arabic language, Islamic history, and many of the other Islamic sciences that would be required for one to serve in a teaching position, such as an imam or a teacher, and that was from 2000 to 2003. We were there in Syria. So one of the other good things or occurrences that happened, as I said, they were both male students and female students. I met my wife there and married my wife there. That's historical. We got married in the Islamic court there in Syria. We've been married for 14 years now with happiness, and so that's one of the other things that happened, benefits of that particular program. So my wife also is a child of this community. Her parents were also members of the Nation of Islam and also transitioned or continued under the leadership of Imam Warithuddin Muhammad to Universal Islam. And she was raised in New York and Miami area, and her parents also encouraged her toward religious studies education, and so that's how we met there in Syria. So after we returned from Syria, there were a few different endeavors that we undertook. One of the endeavors, myself and my wife, we saw while we were in Syria the service of the Hajj. And I know that there has been some specials done on AIB regarding the Hajj. So we have began or started a company where we provide that service to Muslim Americans, but we also started to serve as Imam or as religious teacher in my hometown of Oakland, California, Masjid Warathin, which is one of the historical masjids in our community. Historical in that it is the only masjid that Imam Warathin Muhammad himself served as resident imam. And then there's some other history regarding the Nation of Islam. One of the imams by the name of Muhammad Abdullah, some believe that he may have been that mystical teacher of the Nation of Islam that has that. So we serve there, and California is much more expensive than Georgia, and the Atlanta Masjid community for our association is really the most progressive places to live. So myself and my wife decided to move here, and so we have been serving, assisting Imam Mansour, who's recently went on sabbatical to continue his Islamic education, but had been serving him as assistant imam for 5 years with him here in the Atlanta Masjid community. And so with his decision and plan to continue his education, many saw fit, being the assistant imam, that it would only be natural for me to assist and serve in the resident imam role. Alhamdulillah, here, praise be to Allah, here at the Atlanta Masjid, we have a majlis, a board a governing board, and so there was some conversation with our governing board who suggested that I serve in that role, and that was taken to the broader community for them to lend their support, and they lent their support. And so now, as of today, we sit here serving as resident imam of the Atlanta Masjid of Al-Islam in Atlanta. One important message that I would like to share with our viewers is particularly in the good works that AIB Network is doing, is ensuring that we as Muslims and faith people continue to work together and letting God's work be done in the city of Atlanta and in the world. There are many who want other than God's work to be done, but as the Imam here at the Atlanta Masjid, we want to ensure that we are assisting with God's work and God's plan, so that his work is, I know that's not the verse, but it is on earth as it is in heaven, and that his will is done.
Welcome back to Inside Islam Today. I'm Imam Alameen, and we're going to continue at the Atlanta Masjid of Islam. We're going to speak with a pioneer, young though she may be, Sister Safiyyah Shahid, who has been involved with the community for well over 40 years. Join us on Inside Islam Today with Safiyyah Shahid.
And born and raised in Greater Homes Housing Project in Atlanta, Georgia, near a Greater Hospital, which is Greater Hospital now. And my early memories are of a very rich and nurturing community. Every family knew every other family in the community, and it was one of the principles by which people operated by was to look out for each other. And so I can very clearly remember many people nurturing me beyond my family. There were the neighbors who, if I was out of order, that would get reported to my parents. And because I was a member of such a big family, we were very well known. So we always teasingly say to each other, we were the first Jacksons, okay? The Jackson family was very well known in the Greater Holmes community. My father was a minister. My mother stayed at home, but as a minister's wife, she had a lot of responsibilities. And I think that as I look at my life and how I developed, I know that the type of person that she was and that he was very influential in terms of my upbringing. So strong upbringing, somewhat strict upbringing, and even then the ideas were embedded in me to be a community activist, a community-minded person, because that's the type of community I grew up in. Well, I was a member of Ebenezer Baptist Church, grew up in that church. And of course, you know, going to church every Sunday was one of the values in my family. And so I had heard that she was looking for, Coretta King was looking for a babysitter. This is when I was in high school. And so it turned out that I ended up being the one selected to be the babysitter. And so this was on Auburn Avenue at that home. And such a wonderful experience. Of course, each of those individuals, Dr. King was, you know, we know he was magnificent in his own right, and so was Coretta King in her own right. And she had a very strong identity as a woman, as an African-American woman, but really she was very universal-minded. She was not limited by the idea of race. And of course, you know, Dr. King was not. Such a brilliant man. And such an honor for me to be able to be in the household with them on a regular basis. He was not always at home. As you know, he was very well-traveled and was always somewhere doing good and helping people in situations. One of the most wonderful occasions, I was there when he got the call that he had won the Nobel Peace Prize. So I can't even tell you how that was. And I was there also when he had to go to Selma, Alabama. And I was there when he first got news of the riots in Los Angeles. That was a very tense moment in the household. Here I am in this house, in this home where everyone is very much aware of the societal ills at that time. Segregation, and trying to overcome a lot of those barriers. So I think that, you know, maybe some of those seeds came from there, the type of protest that Dr. King was involved in, the nonviolent protest. But on the other hand, there was another aspect, and I think a lot of the younger people felt like that, you know, that movement was good, but it was not, it was moving too slow. And so later on, I'm trying to put this back in a time frame. I really got interested in some of the, in what was going on throughout the African American community, not just with Dr. King, but, you know, the student movement, but also the Nation of Islam. And a friend of mine introduced me to the Nation of Islam. And you know what it was about. I had heard about the Nation of Islam. I can recall my mama listening to a record by Louis Farrakhan, a white man's heaven is a black man's hell. So that sort of stayed in my mind, that song, even though I didn't really respond to it at that time. But later on, I began to connect the dots, and the more I learned about the Nation of Islam and how proactive that organization was, and how they saw the only solution was to really separate ourselves physically and mentally from white people, that sort of, you know, took a hold in me. And I liked the idea of that they had of what we could do ourselves. Up you mighty people, you can accomplish what you will. That really struck a note with me. and that we should be focused on taking our minds away from a lot of the trivial things and focus on getting farmland, focusing on building hospitals for ourselves, focusing on doing all the things that we should be doing for ourselves that we were allowing other people to do for us. And so that idea of do for self really, as I said, took a hold of me, and I decided that I would, transition from that. Although I believed in Dr. King and what he was about, but I thought that the Nation of Islam offered something much more concrete. Well, by that time I had left the King family, working for them by the time he was assassinated. And so I did, once that did happen, I can remember I was at Spelman College. I can remember exactly where I was in the library, and I got the word that had occurred. And so I immediately called Miss King, was able to go over and just see, just sit with her for a little while. And so really that sort of put the nail in the coffin, because here he had given his life, and he tried to really accomplish gains for African American, and not just African American, for people who were downtrodden. And then he had been assassinated for his efforts. And so for me, I just really said, that, maybe we need to be, I don't want to say aggressive, but, more proactive in taking our own destiny in our hands. And so I joined the Nation of Islam. People have always said I'm a natural leader. So from being the captain of the basketball team to being this, that, and other, then I come into the Nation of Islam, next thing I know I'm a lieutenant in the Nation of Islam. And a quick learner. So I learned, all of the lessons, and then the next thing I know I'm teaching classes to women and girls. And then once the captain who was there before me left, then I was promoted to captain of these women, and my job was to help train the women and girls to be excellent in everything they did, whether it's mother, wife, sister, or whatever. So, and that lasted for some years, my involvement with that, but it really laid the groundwork for my development. As you know, every February 25th was called Savior's Day. And that was during the lifetime of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So we all, a good number of us had traveled to Chicago for that convention. That was our national convention. And on this particular time, 1975, February 25th, we got word that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had passed. So of course that was a shocker, in a way. But at the same time, he was an older man, and he had, his health was not the best. So many people didn't believe it. I did, because I knew that he was getting on up in age. So, but that event, that moment in history really changed my life and the lives of many others, because it closed out one era. An era where we really had separated ourselves from the broader community. But at the same time, towards the end of his life, we were really sort of integrating back into the broader community in a sense. The stance was not as hardcore as it had been. And so then that next day, February 26th, we inaugurate a new leader, Imam Muhammad. And that was the beginning of, it's almost like passing into a new century with such a dynamic leader. And Imam Muhammad, the son of Elijah Muhammad, had been going around the country, traveling the country and teaching, and with his father's permission. And he sort of had a new, it had a new voice. This was a new voice that we were hearing in terms of universal Islam, in terms of joining the millions and millions of Muslims who were practicing Islam proper, we could say. Not a lot of the mythologies and so forth were based on the leadership of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And following the sunnah or the path of Prophet Muhammad. And then I have always said that Imam Muhammad ushered in a quiet revolution, and that a quiet coup is what I call it, that he just, sort of moved a lot of the others out of the way who had figured that they were going to be stepping into leadership, and he took that leadership and he did it boldly. But at the same time, it was in a very powerful and quiet way. And so it seemed like that's what my soul had been hungering for. And with the advent of his leadership, I mean, it just seemed to me as if the world, the opportunities just opened up for those Muslims who were following his leadership. Prior to Imam Muhammad, we had been taught that God was a man, and that he came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad to teach us and really to actually save black people from, all the ills of society. But when Imam Warfdi Muhammad took over, his emphasis was on the oneness of God. His emphasis was on the humanity, that every person, that there was no superiority of one over another, just as Prophet Muhammad himself had said 1,400 years ago. And that we needed to come away from the kind of really false thinking that we had been a part of, and really embrace, again, Islam proper, the oneness of God, one humanity, and the Quran. Yes, absolutely. And although under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we had the Quran, and the Quran was important, and we were taught keep it in the highest place in your home and so forth. But when Imam Muhammad came in, we actually began to read it, and we actually began to understand it, and he began to explain many, many things about the Quran to us and to Al-Islam proper to us, and really awakened us and really broadened our thinking about Islam and the world and the Quran. But the Quran was the book. He brought it to us as the book, and we embraced it. The Arabic language, we really, just as the Muslims many, many centuries ago were inspired through the leadership of Prophet Muhammad, we were inspired through Imam Muhammad to begin to study, to begin to write our own books, to begin to build up our schools, to begin to really focus on community life, and to really embrace and connect with other faiths, that we understood that we're all one humanity, and that there's only one God, and that we need to connect, and if we're going to prosper in this world and flourish, that we need to come together as human beings, as true Muslims, and work together for the betterment of society. So going back to the leadership during the time of the Nation of Islam, when I was captain over the sisters, and then moving from there, once that segment of my life was ended somewhat in terms of the Nation of Islam, there was a reorganization. And so the emphasis came away so much from, just working particularly with women or the brothers work with the men, to community. And part of this community obligation was the development of schools. And so there was already a school when I came to the community, and it was known as the University of Islam. And so that school carried on for a while, and then due to finances, it closed. I believe it was around 1977 that the school closed, but then the school reopened in 1980. And I participated as a parent. I participated as the PTA president, and just always having a connection with the school. But in 1986, I made a decision that I would like to work for the school. I always loved to teach. And education was always important to me. So I came to the school in 1986. By 1989, I became selected. I was selected to be the principal of the school, and we made a lot of advances. We moved from elementary to adding a grade a year until we got all the way to all the 5 grades of the high school, and then in 1995, I became principal of the high school, and so W.D. Muhammad High School really made did a lot of great things. We became part of the Georgia High School Association. We were participating in mock trial, all kinds of things as high schools do. And then in 2005, I became director and principal of the school. Because in our religion, you know, women people don't think that women get the opportunity to really advance in the religion, but we do. And so I went all the way from just being just a regular soldier in the Nation of Islam to director of this most prominent, wonderful school that we have, the Clara Muhammad and W.D. Muhammad High School. Because the religion, there's a place there for us. And the Quran says, to each is the goal to which Allah turns him, and Allah turned my heart to education. And so now I retired from the school 2 years ago, and just sort of, you know, took a year to really assess how did I want my future to go. And then this past year, I was nominated to become a member of the leadership board of the Masjid, the Majlis Ashura, and that's the board that really is a policy-making, governing board for the Masjid and helps the Masjid to make good decisions for the progress, for us to make progress here. And so now I'm a member of that, and I'm the liaison on the Majlis. I served as a liaison to the school. So still connected with education, and still leadership is, you know, seems to pop up everywhere I go.
I hope you have enjoyed going inside of the Atlanta Masjid and talking with Imam Sulaimaan Hamid and Sister Safiyyah Shahid. These are two wonderful individuals who make a great contribution to the life not only of Muslims in Atlanta, but to the broader Atlanta community. Until next week on Inside Islam Today, I'm Imam Pliman El Amin. May God's peace be with you and yours. Assalamu alaikum.